This video is about why British sketch comedy from the 90s and 2000s, if they do newer versions, can't return today. I'm saying that because I grew up in the 90s. Sketch comedy that came on TV, there were a ton of them. It was like a boom in the 90s, particularly in the 90s and 2000s. Back then, less PC culture, controversial, if you want to say so, in many moments with many of the main, sketch comedies, some of the names. Harry Enfield and Chums, Little Miss Jocelyn, Real McCoy, Bottom, all these things that used to come on, absolutely fabulous. These are all things I remember seeing on the TV. I saw this clip of Gen Z watching Little Britain, a short clip, and I wanted to play that clip and obviously delve into why I believe. Today, if you try to do that, a newer version of a Little Britain, for example, of comedy that has those kinds of themes of comedy, it won't go down well.
Do it again.
Fish and chips.
Do it again.
Oh, forget it.
Must be some sort of dish that we don't get over here. Okay, so.
This was a comedy TV show.
Oh my God, was that actually on TV?
I understand it as a skit and you're trying to make people laugh. You can't do that. No.
It's just that time, like you just making jokes with people and things like that publicly was allowed and people found it funny. So I get that sometimes things are a bit snowflakey, a bit far, but that is you know, I think that's
There's the people that say like, oh my God, this is great TV. Oh, it's a shame you can't say anything anymore. There's people that are so like, oh, you can't have this on TV. That's outrageous. I do agree it shouldn't be allowed on TV, but I think you can appreciate it for the comedy that it is.
It simply reminds me that there are loads of people that are this way, that still exist, that simply are not on television. And makes me a little bit anxious about the world, to be honest. The only reason why it's an issue now is because now people are speaking up. But for a long time, nobody said anything.
This video is not just about the clip. It's just about the perspective of comedy and how it's perceived by people, and obviously being able to create comedy in ways where it doesn't offend, but at the same time, it's something that you want to try and make funny. And I'm sure that's the main aim of comedians. Whatever it is you're trying to make funny. With the depiction of that character, it's generally looked at that she's daft, right? It's poking fun at the fact that she's not privy to certain things. But the issue with that, and with comedy like this, to I'm sure a lot of people who are, sensitive to it, it would be based on the fact that this person seems to be poking fun at Mira, which was the Asian character. So using, for example, in this case, curry, will be suggestive of I'm using a stereotype to say, okay, Asians, curry. That's what they eat, right? So you acted like, oh, I don't understand what she said. So you just put curry there. So today, in the society we have today, that will be flagged as, oh my gosh, that's too much. But when I was growing up seeing it, I remember watching it and just thinking, okay, I understand what they're trying to do, right? But it's funny because I look at that and say, okay, in general life, if someone was to do that and it's no context of comedy and you're doing it in a egregious way because the context maybe in that scenario is you're saying it in a derogative way, that's different. But for some reason, when it gets to comedy, it's something that you can still laugh at, depending on who you are. Depending on who you are. And that's the thing about comedy. It's so funny that in certain contexts, you can, depending on who you are, you can look at it and say, okay, I understand what they're trying to do. But if it's said in another scenario, not to do with comedy, then we have an issue. So it's like, how do you reconcile this? Because I don't want to harp on this point with Little Britain. It's just in general, there were moments in different comedy from yesteryear that we can look at and say, that was funny. Or you're pushing a boundary, but we laugh it off. Yes, there will be a lot of controversial moments that will be highlighted in the newspapers back in the day. But people still, for the most part, understood it was comedy. Or people didn't have a voice back then because there was no social media. Just looking at that scene, I'm saying to myself, you can't bring comedy in this way anymore going forward. What will happen is that people who are represented in the joke, for example, in this case, she was a white lady. That's how they're depicting this person. People will start potentially saying, why is that person or people, for example, of a certain background always being looked at as the antagonists? And then someone else will say, oh, but why are you always making jokes at this background? For example, in the Asian lady's perspective. Or if it's a black person, someone will say, Why are you making jokes? Because this could have been interpreted, if it's a black person, they could have put rice and peas. They could have put weed. You could associate all these stereotypes that they may assume. I'm not saying all these things are indicative of people, but I'm saying the notion sometimes of humans and the mentality of what humans may think based on what they've seen or grown up around, they will assume certain things. Because you could have done this for a Chinese person and said, special fried rice, So I'm just basically saying the mentality is not to look at it from a joking standpoint in this day and age. But the thing is, I'm questioning all of these things, and it really just shows you can't make comedy in a certain way because you're having to look out for so many things. Should we do this? Should we do that? So backgrounds and belief systems and perspectives have to always be considered in such a way that it will then nullify the ability to make comedy expansively. That's what I've kind of seen or gathered from this clip. Because if Gen Z are reacting like this, there was only one person that kind of said they can see the comedy side of it. But for the most part, if Gen Z are acting like this, then it shows you where we are in society. It has to be very much considered a thing of the past, particularly if certain groups, certain agendas, or certain things are being pushed in society to say we have to consider that group, or now we have to consider this. Everything is political. Everything is about appeasing. But I do think it's important to always attempt as much as you are when you're creating things to consider people, backgrounds or whatever. But it's key also to try and be as free when you're creating, trying to make that balance of not generally offending groups is the challenge. But things should be assessed in whenever you're doing anything. So that's comedy, whatever walk of life, whatever you do and produce. But it's just being able to understand that there is a comedy aspect that has to be looked at. And that has to be the thing where we try and look at more so. Now, that's again, not to say you're denouncing people's belief systems and things of that nature. I'm not for just purposely doing things in a egregious manner, but I am for the comedic aspect of things. That's key. Assessing comedy, but also trying to straddle the fence of doing things that push boundaries, call out things, and attempt, most importantly, to be funny. But today, it's hard to do that. And that's the issue. That is the issue with comedy, and that's the issue with British sketch comedy, because there are things happening, but not in that kind of style. Also, you can look at things from why British sketch comedy is not the same, because broadcasting shift has been a big thing over the years. Back in the day, if you were watching TV, it was generally 1, 2, 3, and 4. All those channels were the main ones until Channel 5 came as well. But those 4 channels were the main core of where you looked at new programming or anything comedic. We've now got streaming. We've now seen the big change and the competitiveness in streaming and the ease at which you can just go and stream something. A lot of the, ways you can do things online are much more seamless, and it provides obviously more option, I guess. And I think that's a key thing as to why there's also changes. I also think reality shows. I thought of this before, a couple of years ago, and I thought a big change was when reality shows came. If you remember, in the 2000s when Big Brother came, then eventually you saw things like Pop Stars. All these competitions where the general average person has a chance to be known or, famous or succeed in whatever endeavor, these reality shows, entailed. You saw, in my opinion, the changes as time went on. It's just that we weren't privy to it. There was still programming in the early 2000s coming up. There were still shows coming up, sketch shows. But in terms of just the influence started to be more to the novelty of seeing people who are just the average person be viewed, be watched, and then after you starting to look at them as celebrities or as the people to watch, because it was something that was quite different. I think that also moved viewers. Like literally it was put upon viewers to say, okay, do you want to watch this? And then eventually people started gravitating to it. And I think the seamless way or the cheaper way to make those kind of reality shows, for example, the Big Brothers and all of that, enabled things to start diminishing on the sketch show side, because, sketch shows takes a lot financially, script writers, you name it. I think it was just that aspect of seeing the average person starting to be, profiled and viewed, and you start understanding people just from a general sense a bit more. I think the emotional investment started to become a big thing to move people away and change viewing habits. You know, there's been reports, if you've seen over the years, about, you know, budget cuts within certain departments. BBC have had a report. I believe that has also contributed to have more reality shows as well. It's a bit more of a cheaper investment. But I also believe there's a fear sometimes of writers or big broadcasting environments to take a chance on new scripts that I think are edgy, pushing the boundary like comedy. And I think that's also an issue. The mentality, the viewpoint has changed. It's like that taking a chance. It's happening, but it's not happening at the rate that really can give that kind of influx again. And also, like I said earlier, about you have to take in consideration people are very sensitive now. But I think it's also a lack of taking a chance. BBC report that I saw have claimed that comedy is something that garners a lot of finance for them. So it's something that they do claim to care about. But in order for you to get to that point again, it's going to need that edginess. It's going to need that taking a chance. It's going to need that taking a chance on creative boundary pushing. If BBC say that they have high revenues from comedy, then it's going to require being brave to put out certain types of comedy. But again, with the offense stuff and being offended, is that going to be possible to get to that point of getting to another version of a golden era, you know, going forward? But at the end of the day, whatever it is, whether it's budget cuts, whether it's actors have changed, or the directors have changed, or the writers, whatever it is, whether it's viewer habits have changed, I think the main issue is the sensitivity and not wanting to offend groups. And that is the line that I'm thinking is so hard to make work, because there will be Ofcom complaints, there will be all sorts if you offend a certain person or group or belief system. You know, I'm for comedy. I'm for pushing boundaries when it comes to comedy, because I laugh if it's funny, you know, but it has to be generally funny, and it has to take consideration aspects of what the world is, but also being able to make jokes out of it. But how do you do that in this day and age when the sensitivity is at an all-time high from all backgrounds? But in my opinion, I've given it. What's your opinion? It'll be interesting to find out what you guys think.